Stephen Gay is the leader of the asset management team at FHWA in DC. He has been with Federal Highway for 30 years and is responsible for the Federal Highway asset management rulemaking. Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be today in Nashville. We're going to talk about implementing the national performance measures and asset management plans. Pete Stefanos could not be here. As Butch Wadlick said yesterday, we are very busy with the rulemakings, etc. And he had, what do you say, like there's a road path, and today was an important step as we move ahead. And he was on a bubble, could he come or not, and he had to be back in Washington. Talk about the status of the different rulemakings, implementation needs, and capacity building. And I'm probably going to talk more about the implementation needs. What I did is I worked off of Pete's original presentation, and he tried to paint a broad picture of the different rules. And I'll give you a status of the different rulemakings, etc. As you may know, and I imagine many of you are focused on the asset management and pavement side of things, but it's all part of the original MAP 21 legislation, where we talked about the highway safety programs, federal aid, highways, and transit. And I think a key thing, and I often hear from comments, even just paying attention to asset management versus pavement performance. Do you guys talk to each other at Federal Highway? I can tell you this for sure, yes. And there's a lot of meetings and try and coordinate addressing comments, etc. And I know at times I get concerned about how long it's taken since MAP 21 to where we are today with the rulemaking, but a lot of it is just that coordination thing. I know I was responsible for rulemaking back in the 90s, and the whole process has a lot more of that engagement, coordination than we ever had before, and that's part of it. We have had the safety rules published and the one on planning. The one on pavement and bridge performance is scheduled for December, and the one on asset management, October. I know Butch yesterday indicated by Halloween, it may be in the next week or two. So as you can imagine, I'm really excited about that. And we also have the one that deals with congestion and environmental factors. The one on safety, I guess a key thing, to put it in perspective for you all, if you're involved with pavement performance, we talk about having a single measure. With safety, it was also quite interesting. And I know I was involved in some of those discussions, and this somewhat explains some of the time factors. What's a death or a fatality? Of how soon after the fatality does the person have to have had deceased? And how do you get all jurisdictions to be working off the same sheet of music or the same rule? So you have a lot of discussions with those sort of things. When I first went into that meeting, it's pretty clear cut, either they died or they didn't. But it gets a little more complicated. And that's where it deals also similarly, common definitions and that sort of thing, in the reporting basis and assessments. When it comes from the infrastructure, we included bridge and pavement condition. And as you saw in the notice of proposed rulemaking, and we never really had a measure for pavement condition. You know, on the bridge side, it's much easier. They've had in regulation for a long time what to measure for bridges. We've never had that with pavement. And by statute, it won't change in the final rule, a 4-year performance period. States and MPOs do the target setting, and a 2-year progress report by states. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Also, about asset management plans for the NHS. When we had a notice of proposed rulemaking, there were many comments. Comments included, hey, state DOT, do I need to be addressing NHS owned by others? What about, I'm a state DOT and I have some real budget issues. What about declining performance? Implementation and timing. How quick? You may need contracts for collecting data, etc. The comments from Ashton and others. When you did a benefit cost analysis, we showed much more benefit than will be incorporated, and the cost much lower. I think Ashton provided that comment for many of the rules. We went back and looked at it, and we made some changes to account for that. Minimum condition provisions, that applies to the interstate. We looked at that. Pavement measure, that was dealing with IRI. Some liked it, some didn't. You saw what we were proposing in the notice proposed rulemaking where we talked about IRI, cracking, running, faulting. You saw the comments. And I know I can't tell you what's in the final rule, but I'll say this. And when it comes time to questions, you can ask me more pointedly than if you want. You saw what was in the notice proposed rulemaking for IRI, cracking, running, and faulting. You saw the comments. Would have you changed it if you were Federal Highway? I think right there you get your answer. Data collection and reporting, we had comments on that. In the one item, I'll raise it again. We certainly got comments that some states will have to change how they're collecting data. Comments we get, why do I need to change it? Other comments we hear is, Federal Highway, how can you be comparing? Well, we're in Tennessee and Mississippi. We collect our data a little differently. So obviously we had to require one way to collect the data. What is obvious, as part of this final rule, you're gonna see, and what was required for MAP 21, Federal Highway is to set the performance measure. And we try to get a comprehensive measure, indicator of condition. That will be an indicator also of that we can report, and also is indicative of future funding needs. State DOTs and MPOs are to set targets. And I guess a key issue ends up being need to address standardized data collection. How, when, how good, outdated procedures, etc. I know it wasn't too long ago that I know one state DOT was measuring IRI via windshield inspection and then backing it down to a number. So we are trying to address issues like that. In the rulemaking that's in the process, the notice proposed rulemaking and comments we received deals with travel time factors and emissions. As you can see, we received many comments, and they're in the process of reviewing them as we speak. I'm just going to focus on asset management a little bit. To our rulemaking, we had 59 individual comment letters. I thank all the states and industry who commented. You raised a lot of very good issues. And part of the process of, since May 29th, we've been reviewing the comments, addressing them all, and making changes to the rulemaking. But bottom line, MAP 21 requires every state DOT to implement a risk-based asset management plan for the NHS. I know a question I'm commonly asked. I'm with a local agency, be it Denver, Cleveland, or small town here in Tennessee. Should I have an asset management plan? There's absolutely no federal requirement for it. But I'll make a couple comments. Does it need to be as sophisticated? How long would it be? I'll say in New Zealand, in England, the locals are required to develop asset management plans, and they have funding implications tied to it. There's no plan to do anything like that in the US. But does it hurt putting down in writing how you plan on managing your assets? And how you're reaching funding plans, where to put the money. I'm gonna back up for a minute. We saw MAP 21. I see some people with the graying hair in the room. You maybe have some of the history. I see some of the younger people, you may not. Congress came back to federal highway and to state DOTs. At the end of the day, when they asked what did they get for their 35 or 40 billion dollars, we reported we did X projects. And they asked, well, what really changed? And we did not have a consistent way of communicating that. So what the legislation tried to do was they freed up, gave some states some flexibility in how they spent the money. They said, you need to develop an asset management plan explaining when, where, how you're going to spend the money. And we want to see how things change through performance measures and performance reporting. I know that may seem like an oversimplification of MAP 21 and asset management and performance. That's basically what it tried to do. As Hill was going through the developing MAP 21, they had many meetings with AASHTO, state DOTs, and federal highway, and that was clearly the path they were headed. I know I've been a secretary to the AASHTO subcommittee on asset management for quite a few years now, and when I would hear Kirk Steidel, who was the chair for Michigan, and Neil Peterson, the vice chair for Maryland, they'd always say, this whole color of money issue, you feds gotta give us some flexibility. And I know both of them met with the Hill, and I'm sure they communicated that, and that's what tried to be done. And also, we talk about bridge and pavement management systems. We all know the history of that. And if you look at the language in the notice proposed rulemaking, what I basically did was, I'm being a bureaucrat for a minute. If you look at 023 CFR 500, which talked about the requirements for pavement and bridge management systems, which was a should, we basically copied off the language for bridge management systems, played it, tried to update it a little bit so it ties into asset management, and it's a shall because in Title 23, MAP 21, it was a shall. But the bottom line is using the pavement and bridge management systems. I'll talk about that for a minute. You know, as I stand here in Nashville, and I look at Luis Rodriguez in the back of the room, I know I've been to quite a few of the regional pavement management conferences that you used to hold, was it biannually, every couple of years, Luis? Maybe it was even more frequent than that. And we used to have the national conferences. And we haven't really been holding them for whatever reason. Issues with travel, et cetera. I know the last national conference on asset management was in Norfolk, Virginia, about 10 years ago. Is it time to start holding those regional ones? And I know we don't have money like we used to. I know that some of the states don't, but do we need to? I know in Connecticut, Ed, you know, the states get together maybe informally, but is there more we need to do in that area as we implement the PM2 and asset management rules? And I ask that as a question. Being a bureaucrat here again, language directly from Title 23 or MAP 21, defining asset management. And this is the National Conference on Pavement Preservation. And let me tell you, from where I sit, it's written all over that definition. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. And what is the role? And I ask that as a question. You have an excellent mix of that conference here. Agencies, industry, etc. How do we get there? Better life cycle planning, etc. But it's having a sequence of actions that will achieve a desired state of good repair over the life cycle of the assets at minimum practical cost. What does good asset management mean? Accountability, sustainability of the infrastructure, transparency, communication. If I'm going to look at the one on the bottom right, and it's something like the old Boy Scout motto. What are we passing on to the next generation, to your kids and their kids? Has the highway program gotten better? Are we leaving the assets in better condition than we found them? What are the funding needs that our kids are gonna have? What are the MAP 21 requirements? Now I spent a couple minutes talking about this. NHS, pavements and bridges, and I'm gonna focus on pavements. Interstate pavements, NHS non-interstate pavements, similar for bridges. What do you have? What condition is it in? What's your performance targets that you establish? What is the gap to how it's the condition out there? Life cycle cost analysis, life cycle planning. We get comments from this area a lot. And in some areas, I am not going. But we are not talking project level, we're network level. And this is where preservation plays a key role. How does Tennessee, Mississippi, Kentucky, how do you best manage your pavement network over the whole life at a minimum practical cost? What's the game plan? Typical for asphalt pavements, you're doing XAP 2 years, 8 years, 12 years. How do you get the most bang for the buck, and is there a game plan? And I know there's differences throughout with the pavement you have. I remember talking to one of the deputy head up one of the New England states. They said every pavement we have is different. So what's the game plan? Risk management analysis. I know I talk to state DOTs. Haven't had this conversation much with locals. But I have a rep here from Denver, and I know Colorado DOT is one of our leaders when it comes to the whole risk area. I'm certainly talking extreme weather, climate change, seismic issues, money to not do preservation, uncertainty in funding. Is there anything that needs to be done? I know New York DOT developed an asset management plan draft a couple of years ago, and they said they had to raise almost 100 bridges, and that was a priority because of extreme weather events. Caltrans at one point, their number one issue was seismic retrofit on their major bridges. Are there issues that need to be addressed where you are? I know going back a number of years here in Nashville, I didn't ever hear Nashville in the news for extreme weather. But I gotta say there was an event here a couple of years ago that might have been postponed because of flooding and hurricanes and extreme weather. So it's things are happening, and as an owner, are there things that need to be done? Is there, I'm using the term game plan. What's the plan? Is it in writing? Financial plan. I know you all, we had many comments on this issue. Many comments, where we talked about in the notice proposed rulemaking, it said a financial plan should be a minimum of 10 years. Some states said it should be aligned with the STIP, 4 years, a lot of uncertainties in budget, etc. I cannot tell you what's in the final rule. You gotta wait a week or two. And I know AASHTO in their letter said it should be 4 years. But I also heard a key AASHTO official say every other publication that AASHTO has put out calls for a time period of 10 years or longer. In investment strategies, where's the best to put the money? And this goes back to the old trade-off analysis. And I was talking to this group, say, is it pavement preservation, maintenance, new construction, bridges? And this is where the whole performance target, budget, and other issues enter the equation. I know Scott from North Dakota at one point called me in some event and said, you federal highway are so short-sighted that, and I'm putting some words into Scott's mouth just to make a point. You're almost ignorant that you don't realize that as a state DOT, we're dealing with a lot more issues than pavements and bridges. We're dealing with economic development, all sort of things. Yeah, we don't say that in the rule, but we get it. We get it. Of course. I get it. I get it. We get it. That's why you got an asset management plan. We get it. We agree. Also, the issue of performance targets and risk. I'm going to touch on another issue here. And I'm figuring here in the room we have agencies and industry. I'm going to give an example from Utah, but it applies just about anywhere in the country. Pavements in one part of the state really need the preservation work, etc. And the majority of money could go to that part of the state. But for reasons such as maintaining the contractor industry in a certain part of the state, is that a reason why to do work in that part of the state? Yeah, maybe. You know your state a lot better than I'm ever going to. You know, how well do I know Tennessee or Mississippi, Colorado, Kentucky? There may be reasons why you need to do that. That's certainly justifiable from where I sit. Just communicate with your Federal Highway Division office why you're doing these things. And are you comfortable putting it in writing or not? State DOTs at your shot. In locals, you may have similar issues, etc. Are there political factors that you have to address? Sure. Do you have to address them to some degree? But your asset management plan is a way of communicating to them what's happening. And sometimes building that new political project may be a waste of money, particularly when you start considering you have to maintain it for years and years to come. Scope and content of an asset management plan must address pavements and bridges. Quite a few states are including other assets, culverts, signs, ITS assets. A key item includes strategies that will lead to a program or projects that will make progress toward achievement of the state targets for condition and performance of the NHS. I'll touch on this again in a couple of minutes. There's a direct relationship, the asset management rule and the pavement performance rule, and the bridge performance rule. Again, I received comments, you guys talk. Well, the pavement performance and asset management rule, I'm responsible for both. Yes, I talk to myself, maybe more often than I should. States are required to integrate the asset management plan along with other state plans into the statewide transportation planning process. This was in the planning reg that came out a number of months ago. Where does preservation tie in? I think it's a key element of everything, from the performance gap to the risk. Life cycle planning is key. The financial plan, how much money you're going to be needing to do what you expect to do and need to do, and coming up with investment strategies. But also another key item is it's necessary to have quality preservation activities and predictable results. I know going back a number of years ago and how pavement management systems were being used in tracking preservation, etc., and maintenance. And I think of many conversations I had with my good friend Jim Sorensen before he passed away, of how the management systems, the preservation, maintenance, all tied together. We are there. We need to document in it as you're developing the life cycle plan. What's the language for the final rule? Something like a structured sequence of events to have a state of good repair at minimal practical cost. And you need the data to do it. Asset management and performance management, they address both short-term and long-term. We talked about long-term, 10 years or longer, about improving or preserving the condition and the performance of the NHS. If everybody wants to talk about that during questions, we can. The plan should serve as an analytical foundation for developing investment strategies that meet these needs. And the needs would be, You want the pavements in a certain condition, longer term. The performance targets, 2-year and 4-year targets, are measuring how you're getting there. Does it mean sometimes it may get worse before it gets better? I told you earlier, we had questions, comments about declining condition. Yeah, it may. I know, and I may be wrong with the states, but I don't think so. New York, Illinois, Washington State said it's going to get worse before it gets better. Make sure you're coordinating with your Federal Highway Division office, though, because they may react, what are you saying here? And sit down and be sure that everybody's on the same page in doing that, what you're doing. The actual due dates for the asset management plan, I'm not going to get into that. They will be in a final rule that's coming out. But a key item that I'll raise now, when you see the date in the final rule, an important factor was, do you have the pavement data to do it? So there was close coordination between the asset management rule and the PM2 rule. Asset management plan is to be updated at minimum every 4 years, but annually there's a consistency review. So state DOT will work with the Federal Highway of, are the projects that you're undertaking in line with what you say you're going to do in the asset management plan? Because again, pavement management systems, are they being used? Can you run those what-if scenarios? And how are you using that for targets? I know we have a lot of talk about setting targets, and we have I'll use the term friendly dialogue with a smile. When you have many of the performance management webinars, and they talk about setting targets in general, they don't specifically say, for pavement and bridges, you should be using your pavement and bridge management systems. And I say, yes, you should. What are those what-if scenarios? Implementation needs, and I'm going to go through some of these here pretty quickly. Level of readiness, we have surveyed our divisions and worked with them. In the bottom line, a couple of issues that we even touch on are data quality and supporting target setting. We had quite a bit of discussion, and I know you saw it in the notice proposed rulemaking. In this, I will say, the way we're going to get the pavement data is through the HPMS data submittal. So if anyone was unclear about that, that's how we're going to be getting the pavement data. We have set up internal processes of reviewing the data that's coming in. And if we were to review what's happening, I'll just raise a couple of issues. And some of you know Max Grog from my team. Max Grog has been working with this data now going on 2 years. Timeliness, quite a few of the states are submitting data late. When the rules take place, if the data is late, we got a big problem. It won't be accepted. Certain things start kicking in. We got to get them in on time. Completeness. We aren't there yet, but we showed great improvement. Quality. It's okay. I'll add something we did in the initial report from the study will be available when the PM2 rule comes out. I had a project that we went to about 40 states, one piece of equipment, and collected about 10,000 miles of pavement data based on what was in the NPRM. And we're using that as a baseline. We use that to compare with what we had to the NPRM. And bottom line is we are making some changes that some of our hypotheses proved wrong, some were confirmed. But at the same time, I have 10,000 miles of pavement data. And I know in one state, a state was saying, our numbers are showing this. We have a baseline to compare it to. and that'll be available to all to look at in the near future. We are working closely with the LTPP people at Federal Highway, and we'll make it available through that mechanism. Percent poor and missing data has been getting better. Finding bridges. I know some states are very advanced in their tools that they have available, but in some cases, especially when you're looking at bridges on the pavements, just locating them right spot, we've had some challenges. But we're gonna have a tool out there, information coming out in the next year or so, where it's gonna show, you can click on your state, based on the HPMS data, find your pavement conditions, what was reported. Similarly for bridges, all that is something that pretty much is available, but we aren't ready to go live yet. We have developed a HPMS pavement report card. It's now been incorporated into a state DOT's HPMS pavement data submittal, where it shows fair, good, poor, and it shows where certain issues are raised. And once again, we developed this as a tool to improve the quality, completeness of data, etc. Coordination and challenges. And I'm going to talk, this here highlights the Philadelphia MPO area. But I'm going to talk about, we're in Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee. And how do you coordinate the payment performance data, asset management plans, etc.? Memphis has NHS, in Mississippi, in Tennessee. Local owned roads. How does it all come together? And I think a key factor is communication. How are those pavement assets being managed? And is that being captured in an asset management plan? Who's collecting the data and all that sort of thing. Performance reporting. How is that data being displayed, etc.? We're looking at a website in Federal Highway that we compile all the data and it will be reported nationally. I know I have comments that people are asking, well, is anyone going to be able to see? I'll use the word compare, because we're all sensitive to being compared. In the United States in 2016, and everybody wants to be good. But yes, I look at 4 states at the table, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Connecticut. Are they gonna see how their pavement and bridges compare to the others at the table? And may their pavement or bridges look worse than the others? I guarantee you, of the 4, one will be worse than the other 4. One will be better than the other 4, just by the nature of the animal. Yes, they'll be out there. So that's coming, because it will be for all 52 states. We're putting all the pieces together, and we're coming up with guidance on everything from performance-based planning to target setting and so forth. From the asset management side, we have a contract for developing guidance on life cycle planning, risk management, and financial plans. The one on risk and financial plans builds from those 5 documents on each that you can find on the Federal Highway Asset Management website. Just Google FHWA Asset Management. And what we're planning to do with those guidance documents is we're gonna have final draft and hold a couple workshops with state DOTs to go through them. Do they make sense before the final product is finalized? And then we plan on having workshops or something around the country, peer exchanges, rolling that out. We've also developed draft guidance on certification of the state's processes for asset management plans. As we speak, it's being edited and in for legal review, and it also includes guidance on our consistency determination. I'm hoping that that guide certification can come out November-ish. So let's see how that all plays out. Because we have requirements on good guidance and all that sort of thing that we need to go through. Capacity building, and I'll go through this fast. There are tools, Google FHWA performance, TPM toolbox. There are NHI training courses dealing with pavement performance, how we're doing the pavement performance training. It's my team with Louise, another rep from the Resource Center, will be presenting it, just how we're gonna do all that. The details are to be worked out. Don't hesitate to contact Tom Van from my team, Luis Rodriguez. Anytime you need any technical assistance, talk to either of us as we start rolling out those rules. There's a capacity building assistance program for TPM. Go to the TPM website, coordinate with the division office. There's a form to fill out. They try to be very user-friendly in how they're doing all that. With regard to asset management, we have examples of asset management plans out there. Also go to the AASHTO Asset Management Portal. We work quite closely with AASHTO getting information out there. We have regional calls, peer exchanges. If you haven't had the NHI asset management training, have it. You know, I just received input from a consultant where they're saying they're working with a DOT, where they're meeting with staff, with the planning, the pavement and bridges, and how are they communicating within their organization, asset management. You know, there's all different ways of doing it. And then take a look at the asset management plans out there that you see available. And I'm sure you're gonna look at them again when you see the final rule. Somebody has asked, have the draft plans that you see on the website been certified? No, because they can't be certified until the final rule comes out. But if you look at them, and I will not name states, some are a lot more thorough than others. Some, I've had one state DOT say they looked at state X's and they certainly will not do that. You know, yes, there's different scenarios out there, etc. Length of an asset management plan. You see many of them are 80, 100, 120 pages. Butch Voloshin, who we used to work together, I don't see him in the audience, but he may be here, said, why can't it be 20 or 30 pages? Maybe. But the bottom line is you have in writing how you're gonna do business, how are you gonna improve performance over the long term, how's it linked to the short term, and how does it all come together? Thank you.